Welcome to the opening session of the National Traffic Management and Work Zone Safety Conference, and this is the opening session of the Work Zone Conference. We have some wonderful presenters here for you today, and what we're looking to do in this opening session is to set the stage for the several days of presentations that will follow. And we have some wonderful speakers throughout the week, so we're glad that you're here and hope you'll stay with us. Just as a few preliminary announcements, we ask that if you have cell phones or pagers that you put them on silent mode so as not to interrupt the speakers. Also, by way of safety warnings, if in the event we should have a fire or an emergency alarm, the fastest exit is through these doors to your right and down the escalators and out the front doors. That's the quickest exit. Also, restrooms can be located just outside the doors and to your right. So those are the preliminaries. This is an exciting time for us working with ARTBA, Federal Highway Administration, the Texas Transportation Institute, and many other partners who have been involved with rebuilding the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse. As many of you may be aware, the clearinghouse was opened in 1998, quite a number of years ago, and it operated with federal support for 3 years. And then for a number of years, the clearinghouse operated with private support, primarily coming from ARTBA, AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, the Laborers International Union of North America, and several other contributors, as well as the Texas Transportation Institute, who actually housed the clearinghouse, contributed to its operations because they were very dedicated to it. Recently, as a result of new federal legislation, the Federal Highway Administration has again invested into the clearinghouse in a substantial way. And this week, the clearinghouse is launched its new website, completely redesigned, greatly enhanced with a lot of new features, which include online video and training. And I'm going to show you a little video that we've developed as a preview to that. And as part of the expanded work of the clearinghouse, we're now sitting in the National Work Zone Traffic Management and Work Zone Safety Conference. The clearinghouse is now offering conferences and training as part of its umbrella. So we're very excited about what's going on at the clearinghouse. Best of all, for you folks that may have not been aware of it before, please become aware of it. It's a great resource, and the best part is its materials are free. So we hope you take care of it. First speaker this afternoon, we're very pleased to have Stephen Witt, who is the new director, or fairly new director, of the Directorate of Construction for OSHA. I guess it's been in almost a year now. Wow, time flies, Steve. Steve joined the office of the Solicitor of the Department of Labor in October of 1972, so he is a veteran of OSHA and the Department of Labor for many years. He received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Hofstra University, majoring in biology and chemistry. He is a graduate of Boston University School of Law, where he received a Juris Doctorate in 1972 and is a member of the New York State Bar. Mr. Witt was an attorney with the Office of the Solicitor, Occupational Safety and Health Division from October 1972 until January 1983. In 1983, he joined OSHA, where he served as a special assistant to the Assistant Secretary for Labor for Occupational Safety and Health. In 1990, he was appointed Executive Assistant to the Assistant Secretary. Mr. Witt held this position until 1993. He became the director of the Directorate of Technical Support in 1996 and managed the directorate with most of the diverse responsibilities in OSHA, covering many different state-of-the-art capabilities, as well as their technical data center and their Cincinnati Technical Center and many other aspects of OSHA. In 2001, he became the director of the Directorate of Health Standards and Programs and acting director of the Directorate of Safety Standards Programs. As a result of OSHA reorganization in 2002, Mr. Witt became the Directorates of Health and Standards Programs and Safety Standards were combined, and Mr. Witt became the director of that new organization, the Directorate of Standards and Guidance, which is charged with developing workplace standards, regulations, which address significant workplace hazards. From January 2005 until his current assignment, he served as Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of Labor for OSHA. Because of his exceptional long-term accomplishments, Stephen Witt received the 2007 Presidential Ranked Award for Meritorious Senior Professionals. So please welcome Steve Witt.
Hello, everyone. The The bio took longer than my presentation. I apologize. But when you've been around as long as I have, sometimes you just have to bear with it. I just want you to know I'm not as old as that sounded. Yeah, that'd be great. Great. Excuse me, Sam, it's not showing on here. I'm technologically challenged. Oh, yeah? Oh, that's great. Anyway, hello again. Actually, if you work for the federal government, the most impressive thing, at least to me, most important thing to me on what Brad just read was the last line. I was lucky enough last week to receive a Presidential Rank Award, which in the federal government is the highest honor a senior executive can get, and I'm very pleased by that. What I'm going to do today is, in the next, how many minutes, Brad? 12 minutes? Going to make a 40-minute presentation. So I'm originally from Long Island, and those of you who know about New York know we tend to speak rapidly. Even though I haven't lived there since 1967, one of the attributes that I haven't lost. I will go through a lot of material very, very quickly. Please, if you have any questions, make notes. I'll be happy to elaborate. There are a couple of items that I won't be covering in the short time, and if you have any other interests, I hopefully will have some time for Q&A at the end. OSHA has, over the last 7 or 8 years, followed what we call a balanced approach. We have strong, fair, effective enforcement, outreach, education, training, and cooperative voluntary programs. OSHA covers over 7 million workplaces in this country, and it's clear that through our enforcement efforts, we can't cover most of those probably over an 80-year time period. We've developed a number of other programs which allows us to reach more employers and employees and try and have the widest possible reach as possible. Let me just put in perspective what we're dealing with in construction. The BLS fatality numbers for 2006 came out about 6 weeks ago, and the numbers are still much higher than they should be. Of course, anything above 1 fatality a year is too many, but they're much higher than that. The 4 leading causes of fatalities in construction remain as they have for a number of years. In 2006, according to BLS, there were 1,226 fatalities in construction, assuming they captured them all. Falls, struck by, caught in and caught between, and electrocutions are the top 4 and continue to be. Falls, as has been for a number of years, is the leading cause of fatalities in construction, and residential and commercial account for most of those. Let me focus a little on work zone fatalities. The number here, and this is OSHA information system numbers, and the 07 are still preliminary, and assuming we've captured all the work zone fatalities, you'll see it went up from 05 to 06. It may go down this year, but I understand the latest number will be in the mid to high 70s. So there are still more work zone fatalities occurring than should be happening. As I said before, 1 work zone fatality is 1 too many, and I'm sure we all agree with that. We continue to do a significant number of inspections related to work zones. The number and 07 will become final numbers on November 1st. It takes that long to get numbers into our computer system, but we are still doing close to 500 inspections a year. A lot of those are generated by our local emphasis programs, which I will talk about in a moment. Just for your information, I've listed the top 10 most frequently cited standards in highway and heavy highway construction. This is according to the NAICS classification. The first 5 are, you see here, HAZCOM also is in the top 2 or 3 in general industry, but excavation, respiratory protection, protective systems, fall protection, and you'll notice we're still using the general duty clause, accident prevention signs, tags, cranes and derricks, all ones that the industry can relate to. We seem to be finding the same hazards, same problems, issuing similar citations every year. As part of our focus on in construction and trying to go to the right places, we have what we call national emphasis programs. We have 6 or 7 national emphasis programs. 3 of them pertain specifically to construction. Excuse me. Lead and silica, which I won't talk about today, but I will, trenching and excavations, because I have some information I'd like to share with you. About 4 years ago, we initiated a trenching initiative to look at what was happening in the industry, where the fatalities were occurring, and what the situation was when those fatalities did happen. We reviewed trench-related fatality data. This is data from both the federal states and the state plan states. And I don't want to have too many asides or I'll never finish within my time frame. But as most of you know, there are 25 federal states where we have jurisdiction over private industry. There are about 25 federal states. I say about because New York and Connecticut and New Jersey only cover public employees. We still cover private sector in those states, and we monitor the state plans in those states. But the numbers that I'm going to show you come from both federal and state plan data, fatality data. What we did is we looked at the causal factors for these for the fatalities, and we determined that we would, based on this information, develop guidance tools. These are the numbers. The reason they're all listed as preliminaries, we haven't been able to finalize them. The numbers are probably very close to the actual numbers that have been reported over those years. You'll notice that the fatalities have gone down over the years. There has been a steady decline, and most people in the room would say, wow, that's great, we're making a difference. I think we are, but what's sad about it, we still had about 36 fatalities due to trenching because of lack of shoring or sloping. This is what our study has shown so far, and I find this disheartening. We're still having fatalities in trenching. OSHA's had a national emphasis program for over 20 years. And if you look at these numbers, and ignore the red because those are outliers that still have to be resolved, but let's look generally at the numbers. If you look at the top line, no protective system, that means there was no shoring or sloping. In ranges from 88% to 72% of the time there was a fatality, there was no protection afforded to those employees. No protection. Is there anybody today who believes that an employer doesn't know that you need to shore or slope a trench in order to protect employees, especially if you take into account the type of soil? Well, almost 3/4 in 2006 of the fatalities, there was no protective system at all. You'll also notice, let me go to the fourth line down, Hispanic worker, and I'm going to touch on this at the very end of the presentation. Even though Hispanic workers are a growing number in construction, we're seeing a growing number of Hispanic workers that are being killed in trenches, either through lack of training, lack of protective systems, lack of understanding of the language. You'll see no safety and health program, 50% of the time in 2006. No training for all employees, 31%. So I think we all can agree, even though fatalities have been on the decline, and with all the emphases that have been given on this over the years, trenching still is a problem when 3/4 of employers are not providing sloping or shoring in any way to protect their employees. We've done a number of things in addition to the National Emphasis Program. We've prepared, as you see here, a poster, quick card, and we've distributed about 7,000 CDs that NIOSH had prepared. These are all in English and Spanish. We are doing what we can to develop guidance materials, and these are all available, and you can contact me or my office in Washington. We'll be happy to send you as many as you need for whether you're doing training or for your own employees. Construction program inspections. In OSHA, we budget, that is, we send to the Congress an estimate of about 37,700 inspections a year. About 59%, and when I say about, people say, well, why didn't you say about 60%? About 59% because it stayed fairly static over the last 10 years or so. About 59% of our total inspections are in construction. We focus on certain high hazard operations in construction. We develop local emphasis programs, and each of our regions, we have 10 regions across the country, develop an operating plan, and they have to, under the operating plan, tell us how many inspections they're going to do in certain general industry, operations industries, and focused on hazards and in construction. One of the 6 areas that we ask our people to devote a specific number of inspections to in construction is highway, street, and bridge construction. And we also ask them to develop local emphasis programs. These local emphasis programs are followed in every region. The particular type of local emphasis program in each region depends on the industry mix in that region. We have about 130 local emphasis programs ongoing at any time, And if you go to our website, which is osha.gov, we list all the local emphasis programs by region and by area office across the country. I'm going to just mention a few that we have that focus on work zone. Region 1, which is our Boston region, which covers the Northeast, has an emphasis program in Rhode Island that focuses on major tunneling, bridge work, and other underground construction. In Region 4, which is our Atlanta region, Southeast region, they focus on highway building, work zones, but also they're doing a significant amount of outreach. Education, as I said, we believe is an important major component of reducing work zone accidents and fatalities. They're also focusing on, which is not a subject for today, residential fall protection because of the building going on and the continuing number of fatalities in Region 4. And lastly, we also have regional emphasis programs such as Region 6, which is our Dallas region, and this focuses on work zones, and you can see what our compliance officers have been told to look at, and this is a continuing program from last year. One additional item I'd like to mention, as I said, New Jersey is a state plan state, but it only covers public employees. We have a very active program that we've had for a number of years with our OSHA area offices in New Jersey. We have 4. Work closely with the New Jersey State Police. They have been trained in highway construction problems, in work zone issues, and they call us when there is a problem with a problem that they've identified when they're at a particular construction site in New Jersey. And it's turned into a very productive relationship in protecting employees and identifying problems in New Jersey. The next issue I'd like to mention, and this is not under the 3 balanced approach, but it's come up, and since it's for the most part a construction issue, and that's our multi-employer citation policy. I assume a number of you in the room have heard of the Summit decision. Summit Contractors, it is an Arkansas masonry contractor that was cited by OSHA in June of 2003. They appealed those citations, and the administrative law judge who works for the Occupational Safety and Health Commission upheld our citations to the great consternation of the agency. On April 27th of this year, the Review Commission in Washington overturned the ALJ's decision and held that in these particular circumstances, and in this case, Summit was the controlling a general contractor but did not have any employees on site, according to our multi-employer citation policy, which has been in place in some manner since 1974. We cited Summit as the controlling employer. The Review Commission decided, since he did not have employees on site, that the multi-employer citation policy could not be applied, and threw out our citations. We disagree with that. We believe that the employer did have responsibility. It's been appealed now to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. We have filed our briefs, and we will see what the 8th Circuit does. We will be doing probably a couple of things to resolve this issue, and I won't go into the decision, but it was based on a section in one of our regulations, 1910.12a, in which in 1971 we pulled over construction standards under the Construction Safety Act, which we're required to do by statute, and the commission found there was language there that suggests an employer is only responsible for his employees if employees are present on the site at that time. But we disagree with that, and we may be amending that particular section. We're also looking at all our construction standards. Some, it's clear there's multi-employer responsibilities, such as Subpart R steel erection. Others, there is not, and we're looking at least considering whether we would amend those other standards to make clear the multi-employer policy as a requirement, not as a policy. But let me also say the agency made the policy decision at the time that Summit, the Review Commission, acted on Summit. We are still continuing to enforce the policy as stated in our directive, and that directive is available on the web. So the resolution is not here yet. We'll wait till the 8th Circuit Court of Appeal rules, but our enforcement policy remains the same. Cranes and derricks. Let me do a quick update of this. The cranes and derricks standard is based on, as many of our construction standards are, an old standard from most from the mid-50s and 60s, that we adopted in the early 70s under authority, which expired in 1973. A cross-section of industry, labor, equipment manufacturers came to us and asked us to revise it. In the summer of 2003, this group met 11 times and submitted to the agency a consensus standard on cranes and derricks. Everyone would wonder why, if you had this since August 2004, you haven't published the final. Well, in fact, we haven't published a proposal yet. Since I've only been there for the last year, I can only account for the last year. Our staff continues to work on the regulatory analysis, which we're required to do by statutes, and we continue to draft the preamble. We have completed our draft. We're working with the solicitor's office, and those of you who have worked with attorneys before know how long that can be sometimes, and I say that as a former attorney, and I apologize, Brad. We hope to finish that with the solicitor's office next month or so. It then goes to OMB for a 90-day review. Assuming OMB completes their review in a timely manner, we will publish this early next year. Next step will be a comment period, public hearing. We will analyze those comments, and I've been told by Ed Folk that my bonus next year depends on publishing this final standard by December of 2008, and I'll do what I can. The four major issues in cranes and derricks, if you haven't heard before: operator certification, the most controversial, the most disagreement. This committee agreed that consensus would be no more than 2 non-federal members, and there were 25 members, disagreeing with a particular section. For operator certification, we had consensus, but AGC and the National Association of Home Builders did not. The second issue, which we did have consensus, but I think will be an issue for the hearing, is who has responsibility for ground conditions, and the committee rejected drug testing and physical qualifications. Those will not be in the proposal. Usually with negotiated rulemaking, which this was, it was modeled after steel erection. Hopefully you have all interest of industry involved, and you get comments, there won't be a need for hearing, you move quickly to a final. Well, because of the controversy surrounding operator certification, I'm sure we will have a request for a hearing, and that will take time, but we will move as expeditiously as possible to finalize this. Let me just mention, now that I've dwelled so long on enforcement and quickly on standards, one other standard, because I'll probably be asked the question, where are we on employer paying for PPE? This has been going on for a number of years. It predates this administration. The agency has committed to publish a final employer payment for PPE standard by end of November of this year. That's next month. That commitment was made partially out of on the Assistant Secretary's own volition, and also a demand made by the Third Circuit Court of Appeals after a suit was filed. So we will, by court order, publish that final by the end of next month. Cooperative programs, a significant part of what we do in addition to training and education and outreach. We have an alliance program, strategic partnership programs, such as the Electrical Transmission and Distribution Partnership, made up of the IBEW, Quanta, Par Electric, Quanta, Pike, and MYR. We have found that, and I'll give you an example, that the cooperative programs have been an effective use of our resources. We're able to reach many more people than we do during enforcement. And you can make the argument when you deal with a company during enforcement and things aren't going well, that's not necessarily because the company is committed to safety and health, but because of the enforcement action. The cooperative programs, we interact with many more employers than we do through enforcement, and this is voluntary, so we have to believe that these companies are interested in safety and health management programs. One alliance I do want to focus on, the construction alliances. There are 12 of them. Let me read a few. American Pipeline Contractors Association, Concrete Sawing and Drilling, but principally the Roadway Work Zone Safety and Health Partners Alliance, which was renewed in January of this year, and I've listed the members. Brad has given me 1 minute. Brad, let me take about 2. I'm talking about your alliance. This alliance, I think, is a good example of what we do with alliances. They work closely with the members of the alliance. They help us support training, develop guidance materials, and most of the alliances focus on Hispanic outreach, which is a very significant problem. Next thing I want to mention is the Susan Harwood training grants. Once again, ARTBA as a group has received 2 in the last 2 years. These are 3 other grants that have been received related to Work Zone, about $1,100,000 for the last 2 years. If we look at Focus 4, which is the 4 main causes of fatalities, it's much more of the Harwood grant money has gone into this. It's $5 or $6 million. Our program is about $10 or $11 million a year. Brad, I only have one bit left. Hispanic outreach. This, I have many more slides I'm going to show today about the problems that you're all dealing with the Hispanic workforce and other hard to reach groups where English is not their first language. But let me just speak about Hispanic for a moment. As you can see, the number of Hispanic workers in the construction industry is growing every year. That's actually a little over 2.5 million people according to 2005 BLS data. Let me just show you fatalities and fatality rates in construction. As I said earlier, the number for fatalities in construction in 2006 was 1,226. You notice employment has been going up 10.7 to 14.5 million from 05 to 06. The rate per 100,000 for all construction workers went down slightly in 2006. But if you look at the bottom line right, the fatality rate for Hispanics continues to go up, continues to be above the average for all construction workers per 100,000. I know training is a problem. Adequate training is a problem. The transience of the workforce is a problem, and non-English speaking is a problem. We've done a number of things to support employers and employees in the area of Hispanic. We have a special Hispanic compliance assistance webpage which lists many of our standards, our guidance documents, our other information we've produced in Spanish. This is an example of an e-tool. This is an interactive. This is prevention of fatalities. If you link on these online, you can find a lot of pictograms with means to identify and prevent hazards, all in Spanish. We've been doing a number of things as an agency in the area of products to support employers and employees in both English and Spanish. We have a dictionary with pictograms. We have quick cards, and let me just. Okay. We have a number of English and Spanish quick cards, fact sheets, and let me just leave this up here. All our regions continue to work with local organizations. We go to job fairs. We've worked with the Mexican Consulate. We work with the Spanish construction organizations to get materials in both English and Spanish, and we continue to work with them to develop more information. Let me just show you a few things we put together. If you'd like copies of these, you can call my office, and it's 202-693-2020, and we will send you what you need. We have a fact sheet on work zone traffic safety. We have a roadway safety CD that we did in collaboration with the National Asphalt Paving Association. We have guidelines to reduce motor vehicle crashes that we did in conjunction with NHTSA. And we have what we call quick cards. This is safe driving practices for employees, and this is work zone safety in English and work zone safety in Spanish. We find that these are very easy to use as a basis for training, for handouts, and I'll be happy to provide you as many copies as you need. And with that, Brad, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next let me introduce Michael Halliday is the Director of Safety Integration, part of the leadership team for safety in the Federal Highway Administration. This office directs and manages safety strategic planning efforts, the focused approach for safety in FHWA, safety research and technology programs, training and education for highway safety, and international activities. His office also leads efforts to ensure integration of safety issues with other key initiatives, with a strong focus on legislative and regulatory issues, intelligent transportation systems programs, and coordinating with partners, including the National Highway Traffic Administration, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and organizations outside the federal government. Since joining FHWA in the mid-1970s, Mr. Halliday's assignments within the agency have included almost all phases of project development and delivery, including planning, highway design, construction, operations, federal aid processes, commercial vehicle safety, and research and technology transfer. And he's really excited to get started even before I finish reading about him, so we will turn the time over to Michael Halliday.
Let's try to move along there. Thank you, Brad. It is a pleasure to, that work for folks? It is a pleasure to share the table up here with another federal official from inside the Beltway. I think we're one of the few folks here with coat and tie on this morning. I think there might be a few others this afternoon. But very pleased that Brad invited Federal Highway Administration to be here to share with you some of our perspectives for the next few minutes. This is a very great gathering that's been organized by ARPA, sponsored by the Work Zone Clearinghouse, and we're very pleased to be part of it. What I'm going to do for today is give you some thoughts on the overall safety challenge. And then, of course, how does the Work Zone Safety Challenge fit into that? Talk about some of the best practices, very briefly. Talk about some of the regulations, the resources. And I say very briefly only because what I'm going to go over really just serves as an introduction. You've got folks here over the next 2 days that are going to go through the training opportunities, the best practices, the processes, a great agenda that's been pulled together by the folks here at ARPA. The safety challenge. Why are we concerned about safety? I'd like to start with a little quiz. On the average day in the United States, and this is 2005, how many traffic crashes occur? How many would say A? How many would guess that number? How many would say B? Got some B's. C? We got more. D, too many to count. Yeah, it seems that way sometimes. There are a lot to count out there. On a typical year in 2005, there were over 6 million crashes happened in this country. Most of those were property damage only, some 4 million in some, 39,000 in some were fatality crashes. And so actually the correct answer on a daily basis is just about 17,000 crashes occur in the United States. How many people die from those crashes? This is what we focus on, frankly, within Federal Highway Administration and National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Who are really dying from these crashes, serious injuries, incapacitating injuries? Do we have a guess? A, B, C. We're focusing on C there. That is true. About 120 people per day are dying on America's roads and streets from traffic crashes. And that's a number that really strikes us all as unacceptable. This is the last few years, a decade or so, in terms of numbers. In the early 1900s, early 1990s, 45,000. We've seen a little decline. The blue bars are fatality numbers. The rate per fatality rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled is the red line going down. So we have seen a steady progression down, but we've really reached a plateau very much over the past 10 to 15 years. And so safety is getting harder and harder to achieve, harder and harder to improve what we're doing out there. And this is something that we have a really broad range of programs on within Federal Highway Administration. Within our part that we carry on within USDOT, we do focus on the strategic approach, state-based strategic plans. A lot of things good things are happening out there among the states and locals in terms of a comprehensive, data-driven approach that takes into account the 4 E's of safety. How do you bring together the engineering solutions, the education, the enforcement, the emergency services? All of these, of course, are very important to work zone responses also, but in addition to the large highway safety problem, considering all roadways and making data-driven decisions. Implementing those 4 E's, education, enforcement, safety belts, drunk drivings. We have, particularly within the department, emphasis on that with National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, engineering and operations, Federal Highway working closely with the states and locals, emergency services. In the broad context, this is our safety challenge. When it comes to Federal Highway Administration, we look at where the fatalities are happening, and we think that what we can best focus on, and we do this in partnership with National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, but we look at where the fatalities are happening. 58% of the fatalities involve vehicles that leave the roadway. Over 20% involve intersections. Pedestrians, 11%. And speeding, over 30%. About a third of the fatalities out there are happening in a situation where someone is speeding. These are the things that Federal Highway, as an overall emphasis, are really moving forward with in terms of our technical assistance, our programmatic focus, our training activities, and so forth. And certainly in each one of these cases, what we're focusing on here this week, work zones are very important. Have a next quiz. How many people are dying in work zones each day? We had a number from OSHA, and I think that included only the workers in the construction activities. Many more people are dying in a work zone environment. That includes the drivers, perhaps pedestrians, and so forth. I think we have consensus around C again, and we didn't do that on purpose. This is it's not always C. Today it is. 3 people per day dying in America's work zones. So what are the challenges? An overview of what I wanted to provide today. For the driver, increasing congestion, increasing changes in traffic pattern, increasing just density of traffic, leading to frustration. More work zones are out there. That driver needs to be focused on in terms of what we can do. The worker, and a lot of the focus obviously in OSHA, a lot of the focus on the road builders, the construction crews that are out there, the proximity to traffic. So much of this construction, a great majority of it now is happening under very dense traffic conditions. Didn't used to be that way. When I first came to the agency, I came in the era in the mid-70s when we were finishing up the interstate system, new construction, new location in many cases. That's very rare in today's situation. We've got visibility issues, issues within the work zone themselves, and of course focusing on that in today's, in the next couple days. I want to address a few things in this and finish up when talking about best practices, an overview of some of the regulations that we have in terms of work zone safety, and some of the resources. Brad talked about some of the resources with the clearinghouse, and I'll touch on that also. You're going to hear a lot about these things over the next couple days, presentation on road safety audits. They originated back in the 80s, I suppose, in the UK, and in fact have been adopted worldwide. There is some special work going on that we're sponsoring in Federal Highway Administration, some of the work zone development, the grants that are going into guidelines for road safety audits for work zones. Speed monitoring displays, getting those displays in advance of the work zone, slowing down traffic, getting traffic more uniform in terms of speed, that can really help in terms of technologies. Variable speed limits. How can you adjust speed based on the needs of that particular time in advance of the work zone and then actually at the work zone itself? Some states have gone to the process of really only requiring significant reductions in speed when workers are present. And so if you have a variable speed limit process that again can be supported with your legislation and adjudication, that can be very effective in terms of the public, the driving public, respecting that work zone. And if they don't respect that work zone, of course, there is automated enforcement, photo enforcement activities. Principally, you're going to be hearing, I think this week, from somebody from the Illinois Department of Transportation. They've got some specific activities underway on photo enforcement for work zones. For regulations, I'm going to touch on the work zone final rule. This has been a lot of activity around that, and that actually takes effect to be enforced beginning this week, and high visibility garments. This updated rule establishes requirements and guidance specifically that focuses on the broader set of impacts in terms of work zone safety and mobility. How do you balance safety and mobility in today's world? It is a different world out there. Developing strategies to manage these impacts on all federal aid highway projects. This final rule, this rule was published about 3 years ago, excuse me, published in 2004. There's been a very active education campaign, very active outreach campaign over the past few years. I'll touch on some of the aspects of that. And that rule really must begin implementation October 12th of this year. So it's very active. What does that mean? That means all recipients of federal aid funds, states and locals that receive those federal aid funds, must put these regulation changes into effect. It does require some business changes and possible contract changes. The key concept behind this rule really is that our situation out there has changed in terms of the intensity work zones, the type of transportation. It's more than just traffic control at the site. You need to be taking a more broad transportation management look at the projects and the system. Better understand and anticipate, plan for the impacts very early in project development. When you're first looking at scheduling projects, at programming projects, the sequence of projects that you might have in a particular geographic area, you can make a difference in terms of choosing what projects go in, staging of those projects. When you're in design, looking at the work zone applications, the traffic applications, safety and mobility, you can stage the project different ways in your design process, and obviously during construction and evaluation processes. Considering those solutions that really go beyond the immediate work zone vicinity, as I say, transportation management. What can you do in a significant project for managing demand, for giving alternate routes for travelers, for affecting transit improvements, signal timing for alternate routes? Really looking at the overall needs of the transportation system and integrating this thinking into the policy and procedures in a state DOT. In a nutshell, it really is looking at three different areas of agency activities. Policy, looking at how the leadership is committed to integrating in a systematic way work zone impacts, so that policy comes down into processes and procedures to implement the policy, and then certainly project-level procedures. And that feeds back up. What are we learning on projects that affect our processes, that affect our policy? Work zone policy, systematic. Leadership commitment at the DOT level. Agency procedures, there's tools and requirements on assessing the impacts of work zones. How do you assess the impacts on an overall basis, individual projects? Training, use of data, requirements to look at the safety and operational data. What are you seeing in individual projects? What are you seeing system-wide? And also to conduct regular process reviews of how your procedures are working within the state. And then you come down to project-level procedures, identifying significant projects. There is a difference between significant projects that really have a dramatic impact, dramatic disruption impact, and those projects do require a more expanded transportation management plan that includes a traffic operations component and a public information component. All projects are to have a transportation management plan. Insignificant projects, projects that are more routine, can go forward with just a traffic control plan. If you're talking about significant projects, it's about going a little bit further. Worker visibility rule was published about a year ago, is effective next year in November. It does require higher classes of visibility garments, and includes incident responders as well as volunteer workers. This is a rule that has come out, as I say, fairly recently. We have some exceptions worked into that rule for law enforcement. When they're in the process of law enforcement, they might be certainly managing traffic. In many cases, it's not good for them to be highly visible, and so there are some exceptions built into that. I want to talk about resources. The work zone safety grants, I'm getting the call too there. Thank you, Brad. You'll be learning more about that this week, a series of presentations. A lot of these folks are here this week, and so we're real excited about the training activities that are getting underway with these contractors. You've heard about the clearinghouse, redesigned, launching this week, CD available with a number of resources. I am learning myself, and really enjoyed looking through the CD, finding out the questions, frequently asked questions, and so forth. Repository of the grant deliverables. Websites, of course, Federal Highway Administration. We share implementation activities with our Office of Operations. They actually have the lead in the overall work zone arena when it comes to work zone safety. Mo Oliver of my staff, who is here this week with us, is in charge of that area of activity and is very active with the contractors mentioned. Program overview, we have peer assistance, we have brochures available that explain the overall rule, peer-to-peer assistance program, and then a series of implementation guides. An overall guide on implementing the rule, work zone impacts, public information, how to go about advising the public, some best practices there, and then last but not least, guidelines for creating transportation management plans.
We'd like to introduce Ginger Quinn. She is the Assistant State Work Zone Safety Coordinator with the Virginia Department of Transportation, an unusual state where they own almost virtually all the roads in the state, whereas most states, counties, or municipalities own many of them. And in Virginia, the state owns almost all the roads. Her primary responsibilities are to implement work zone safety training for maintenance and construction personnel, as well as maintaining and updating Virginia's Work Area Protection Manual. And that's their counterpart to the MUTCD Part 6. And its work zone safety guidelines for temporary traffic control pocket guide. Prior to her current position with the department, Ginger spent 12 years with the Salem District Work Zone Safety Coordinator, where she served as a team leader involved in work zone training, preliminary engineering, project development, and construction issues as related to maintenance of traffic and for safety for the traveling public and worker safety. Ginger started her career as a sign fabricator in the Department of Sign Fabrication and has her bachelor's degree in business administration. So now we hear not only from the federal but the state perspective on work zone safety. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to kind of kick off where our last speaker was and talk a little bit about what we're doing with the final rule and work zone speed limits. So we're going to talk about our training requirements, which we just unveiled. We got our package over to the feds, hopefully the end of last week for the final rule, so that we'll be in compliance with their requirements. And then talk about work zone safety speed limits a little bit. But to give you a little bit of background about VDOT, since 2002, we have been training our maintenance forces. Shortly thereafter, we kicked off and started training our inspectors, and it built into working with the Virginia Transportation Construction Alliance, and we started co-working with them and training some of the road builders, our consultant inspectors that we had working for the department, and we also had, at that time, it was kind of a multiple disciplinary team. We had, like I said, the road builders, construction, and then VDOT employees in there. So it was a kind of a big team building session, which led into a lot more partnerships in between VDOT and our construction alliance, as well as it carried over onto our project. So it was very successful. We have been working on our training duties, and we developed a multiple disciplinary team again there within the last year. Started last year in December. We had a FHWA representative. Actually, we went through 3 of them, helping us with our program. We worked with the Transportation Construction Alliance. Again, we had representatives there so that we had voice for the road builders that were working in the state of Virginia, VDOT, and then VDOT entities, which include location and design that work with our road builders. We also had our construction end of the house, asset management, our maintenance end of the house. So we had everybody involved that we thought would help to implement this program. Put my thoughts here. I need to be following my little notes here instead of trying to do it by memory. I apologize. So pretty much I've covered what my notes said there earlier, but one thing that I didn't cover was we're going to implement this with 4 things here. Maintenance, which is maintenance operations, construction, which will be our inspectors, people working out there, roadway designs, and law enforcement responsibilities. So those are our 4 areas of focus of training that we're going to do. And we implement these by calling them a basic, intermediate, advanced, and training enforcement course. Our basic course will be, again, for our maintenance, and they will be a 1-day course. We'll have a 2-day course for our intermediate, which we'll be talking more, and we're talking traffic control devices in our training. Talking our work area protection manual, which again is a supplement to the MUTCD. We meet or exceed those requirements. So we're following along those guidelines. We also we have a work zone pocket guide that we implement in our basic training, and then when we advance into the intermediate and advanced, we're talking with the pocket guide along with our work area protection manual, using that as a training. And then we're going to work into the law enforcement field. We feel like that's one training that we've lacked. We've been doing training with everybody else, but we have right now state police working in our work zones that think that they're a truck-mounted attenuator. So we're trying to improve those things. We don't want them to be the first incident for somebody to ram into the back of that trooper. So we want to give them a training so that they get educated on what a work zone is, what the limits of the work zone is, as well as, is the accident, if we have an accident involved in a work zone, is it contributed to the accident? Is it because of the queue? outside of our signs, we need that information to track what's going on in that work environment. And the law enforcement training will be a web-based training. The other three will be in class, and we are developing this training to be sold outside from VDOT to the private sector so that they don't have to go through. But you can see here now these are our training requirements. We've got our maintenance people, we've got contractors, non-supervisory, basic would be also under utilities, and we have what we call in VDOT maintenance contract monitors that oversee maintenance activities that are being performed by contractors. And then we're going to have our intermediate class. One thing that we did do too was we said one per site, one per work site. So that doesn't mean that that work project would be overloaded with so many people trained. So we're kind of keeping it condensed so that we don't have everybody on that work site trained. But ideally, that's what we would like to happen, is for that everybody be trained in work zone safety. And that will be determined by either the department, the way the district would like to go, or the way the contractors would like to go that are working in the state of Virginia. Our inspectors, you see here a couple that are highlighted in yellow. Our work zone safety coordinators in our regions, our ENS safety engineers, and our traffic control supervisor, which will be under a special provision. These people need to be trained through ATSA. We have to have a certification. We feel like that they need to get a little bit more training, and maybe ATSA exceeds what we're getting, plus they have that certification because they're making a lot of decisions out there on our roadways to improve safety on that work zone. The traffic control supervisor special provision here that you see, we'll be adding that to some of our major contracts, our category 3 projects where we have a lot of stuff going on, such as Springfield Interchange. A lot of people have heard of that about up around DC. So we would have that traffic control supervisor, and his primary responsibility is going to be oversee the installation of traffic control devices throughout the life of that project. He can have other duties to do, and we felt that that was critical because typically once you get the traffic control in, you kind of have a slowdown, and then you have to do other things again with traffic. So that's kind of how we're moving in that direction. We also have contract monitors and land developers that are working within VDOT, and that's kind of the land development process has kind of expanded in Northern Virginia where we have a lot of traffic there. They're starting to build roadways when they're building them all. So we need to get these people educated, need to get them into our training classes and talk about work zone safety with them because that's something that we've been lacking in the past. Our challenges that we're facing, of course, with everybody else are funds and the trainers. Where do we get our trainers from? So the funds, I'm sure that everybody will be struggling, not VDOT, but also our contractors, where we get the money to pay for this. We're just going to have to grin and bear it and move forward with that training because we will be required, if you're working in the state of Virginia, we'll be required to go through the training by January 1, 2009. The trainers, we're looking to consult outside of VDOT. It will really be up to the regions on how they develop their training plans. I mean, we're giving them the basics, and then they move forward with the training process. So we do have a shortfall of trainers because typically in the past we've used the work zone safety coordinators, and those trainers there are just a few in number. So we're looking at other ways to get training to happen. What they'll have to do is submit a training waiver, basically an application saying that I've been doing this training for X number of years, and I'd like to get on VDOT's training approved plan in order to come in and do work zone training in the state of Virginia. Also, as far as the training goes, the contractors will be able to submit their training plan. They'll be able to design and implement their own training plan, but they'll have to follow our guidelines and our outlines in order to do that. But there again, VDOT is trying to make it user-friendly. We're going to do the training materials, have the training materials available for the contractors to buy if they wish to buy. And then we're going to move on to reducing speed limits and work zones real quick. Over the last several years, the Work Area Protection Manual as well as the MUTCD says we shouldn't reduce the speed limit unless there's a reason for doing it. In the past, we've kind of reduced it to speed when we thought we needed to do it through the Regional Traffic Engineer's Office. So now we've kind of come up with a way to get organized. Everybody within the state will be doing a field evaluation of the work zone. What are the requirements? Why have we reduced the speed? And it will all be documented. The reason being there is we get challenged a lot of times in our work zones, not just from the contractors in, we want you to reduce the speed. PDOT may think that it's actually a good thing that we're reducing the speeds in our work zone. In actuality, when our customers go through our work zones, they're saying we're crazy because we've reduced that speed. So we're trying to eliminate that, try to get everybody together on the same page, have documentation of why we're reducing our speed limits in our work zones. And we've come up with this form. It was originally developed in the Salem district where I was working, and we're moving along with this form. We have it out there, resource for internal customers right now, but it talks about the lane widths, what is our roadway, the ADT posted speed limit, what our lane width's going to be during the construction, what are we doing there. This is just kind of a view of our form that we developed. In the evaluation area of the form, we're going to identify the category, pavement conditions, whether it's spalling, whether we got potholes out on that roadway, shoulder conditions as well. Do we need to rebuild those shoulders? Why are we out there? What are we doing? Where's the construction work going to be on the shoulder? Are we going to be encroaching the lanes? What are we doing here? So that's what we're doing. Is it working a median? What's going on here? And in the end, it helps us, to say, well, maybe we need to reduce the speed. We've got workers within 2 feet of the travelway. Maybe it's a good idea to reduce the speed. We've got lane widths less than 11 feet, concrete barrier encroaching in open lanes. And we've got some guidelines that we are working with, trying to defend and define why we're reducing that work zone. And we also took a report that we found a Transportation Research Board had out there. So we're using that as our documentation to help us determine our speed limits and work zones.
And I know that there was one here, particularly. Buenas tardes.
I'm from Puerto Rico, and I speak Spanish. I have been in this business for over 25 years, and the issue of the Hispanic area has been always there, but the critical things are seen right now. I have like 7 goals, but I'm going to summarize. Number one, we need to show that we care. Okay? And we care is more than just statistics. And this is just about people. Those are our users. They have to perceive that we really do care. And when I mean that, this is more than science. The general perception nationwide is that major highways, at least in Puerto Rico and several places that I have been, is that you have construction signs that you anticipate, but you see signs forever. You have a full new governor, and you see the signs always in the highways, and you never finish construction. And then they say, that's part of the politics. You have to change that attitude. You have to change that attitude. We have to do the business of addressing the engineering, addressing the safety matters, anticipating the future that we know how to do. But as soon as they see that we care, that will make the difference. And it's more than statistics. I have like over 20 questions here, but that's the point, Mike. And here, if you speak English, and all of us here, how many people are here the next generation of professionals? How many young people? All of us are young, okay? Look this, Mike. We need to see in the front, exchange a pass of baton. And on these big new conferences, we need to have female, like we have here, male students, black, white, from different places, from Mexico, from Puerto Rico, and we can share those experiences as well. Keep that in mind. That is the general message. And thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. Any other questions for our panel? I see one in the back. Here. Virginia, or Ginger, can you come up here and just repeat the question and then answer it quickly?
His question was, how are we going to ensure that we're actually getting people trained in the state of Virginia? The contractor will have to submit his training plan, his PowerPoint presentations per se, following our guidelines that we have outlined in our traffic management plan, training part of that TMP. They'll have to meet that guideline, submit it to our work zone training committee for approval, and then we'll say yay or nay, or you need to work a little bit here or a little bit there in order to bring it up to our standards. And then at that point, once they start implementing their training, they will submit names to us, and we'll keep a database that says that they've trained somebody from their company in order to perform their, they've been through the work zone training, so we're just kind of doing a checks and balance. Does that answer your question?
They do the training.
I guess he said, how again, really, how are we ensuring it? And really, there's no way that we can ensure positively that they've been through the training. We have to take a person's word, and if something happens on that in that work zone, then we're going to go back to our training records and see if they had somebody out there on that work site that's been through the training program. We're going to issue cards that says that this person's been through the training, and eventually we'll get into our specs that everybody has to go through this training by 2009, January 1, and they'll have that training card with them, and we'll have checks and balances throughout, making sure that they at least have their card. And there again, there's no guarantee that they've been through that training program, but we hope that they have.
We've heard several presentations from the public sector. Now we're going to hear some ideas and reviews of these big issues that are coming up from the, I said public, I got it mixed up, the private sector. Our first speaker today is going to be Scott Schneider. Scott is the Director of Occupational Safety and Health for the Laborers Health and Safety Fund of North America. This fund is a joint labor management nonprofit associated with the Laborers International Union of North America, which represents 800,000, primarily in construction workers in the United States and Canada. He's been with the fund for 9 years. He has a master's degree in industrial hygiene from the University of Pittsburgh and a master's degree in zoology from the University of Michigan. He has been a certified industrial hygienist since 1989. For the past 27 years, he's been doing occupational safety and health work for the labor movement. His areas of interest are work zone safety, construction ergonomics, and hearing loss prevention. And those who are involved in a lot of the safety standards know Scott very well. So welcome, Scott, and thank you for coming.
Okay, thanks for inviting me, Brad. It's really an honor to be here and to be asked to speak. We've been working very closely with ARTBA and NAPA and the Operating Engineers Union, our training arm, Labor's Agency Training Fund, ASHTO, TTI, and CNA on some work zone safety training projects. And I urge you, when you go to the Clearinghouse website, there's a program that we worked on jointly that you can download. We've had over 5,300 people download it in the last couple of years. It's a free training program in English, Spanish, and Portuguese on the major topics in work zone safety. I think it's been very, very successful, funded in part by OSHA and now funded by Federal Highway. So when Brad asked me to speak, he asked me to talk about, well, what are the challenges facing us in the next couple of years? So I was thinking to myself, well, what are the major problems that we're really confronting? And the first thing is, if you look at fatalities in work zones, particularly among work zone workers, the biggest challenge is people being struck by or backed over or run over by vehicles. And by vehicles, I mean either construction vehicles like dump trucks or by motorists. So that's clearly the major issue that we face. And obviously there are a number of ways to solve this problem. There is technology that's available to solve this. There's video cameras, radar systems to try to prevent people from being backed over where the operator can actually see and know that someone's behind them. In terms of motorists, there's police presence and better traffic control setups, speed enforcement, positive barriers, automated flagger stations that can help prevent motorists from entering the work zone. And also, this is another project that we've been working on with NIOSH and ARTBA and NAPA and the Operators Union is developing an internal traffic control plan for inside the work zone to minimize the amount of backing up. And you'll hear more about this later today in David Fosbrook's session. In terms of injuries, not fatalities, in terms of injuries, what's the number one injury in road construction? Well, it's sprain and strain injuries. Looking at ergonomics, how can we reduce the amount of manual handling that's being done? How can we minimize the amount of awkward postures that are being done? And there is quite a bit that can be done. And in fact, we've worked with NIOSH lately over the last year or two, and sometime this month there'll be a new publication from NIOSH on preventing sprain and strain injuries, simple solutions in the construction industry, including road construction. And third, if we look at illnesses, what are the major risks in terms of illnesses? Clearly, the things that rise to the top are things like silica exposures and noise in road construction. And we know that there are lots of controls out there to reduce noise levels on road construction and also to reduce silica exposures through wet cutting, etc. But the fact remains that most of these hazards here are largely unregulated by OSHA or by Federal Highway. Federal Highway does put a lot of energy into looking at traffic control for people moving through work zones, but not a lot of emphasis on traffic control within the work zones and reducing backovers and runovers. Sprain and strain injuries, ergonomics, there's guidance out there, there's lots of some training programs, but little in the way of regulations or guidance documents from the federal government. And then if we look at silica and noise, OSHA does have silica and noise standards essentially. They have dust standards and they have a noise standard, but they're tremendously outdated and not enforced in road construction very much. So frankly, we have these major hazards for fatalities, for injuries, and for illnesses that are largely unregulated. So the question is, what can we do about it? What should we be doing about these? In the area of regulations, OSHA has had on the books for many years that they plan on putting out regulations on silica and on hearing loss prevention for construction workers. But we haven't seen any movement on those for many years, so it's unlikely it'll come soon. We have been working with all of our partners and the ANSI A10 committee to develop an ANSI standard on work zone safety. And we hope to have a draft of that done this fall and ballot it this winter. In terms of investing in new technology, how can we encourage contractors to use this new technologies, to use video cameras, automated flagger stations? How can we get them to develop internal traffic control plans? I think first we have to make them aware that this technology is available and can be an effective means of reducing the risks. And I think this Federal Highway rule that we've been working on for years, a couple years, to have safety as a separate line item in the bid documents could be very helpful in terms of getting people to invest in this kind of technology. What about making the business case? We hear this a lot. We say, well, look, just make the business case. Show employers where they're going to save money using these interventions, how it's going to save them money, and they'll adopt it. And I think that's true. However, if you look at ergonomics, 1/3 of all workers' comp costs are related to sprain and strain injuries on the job. And yet, we haven't seen a lot of adoption of ergonomic interventions or ergonomic programs in construction, and particularly in road construction. I think we need to do a lot more education of contractors about what this means, how to do it, and what the benefits are to them. And hopefully there'll be some change in that area. And I think this is really a key area because one of the problems we have in construction is we're losing skilled workers. The workforce is aging. And it's very difficult to get people to go into construction. So I think if we can prevent people from getting sprain and strain injuries and becoming disabled because of it, hopefully they'll be able to stay in construction and will retain these experienced workers for longer. And in addition to that, we know that these ergonomic interventions are also going to help improve productivity. Been tons and tons of studies that show the relationship between ergonomics and productivity. In fact, the first study on ergonomics in the construction industry was done in 1891 and they introduced improvements in the masonry trades and found like a 250% increase in productivity. So I think there's plenty of information to support that. On noise, we have a little bit harder problem, but we are finding some success. In New York City, for example, in July 1st, there's a new community noise ordinance. In New York City, they get 50,000 phone calls every year complaining about construction noise. It's one of the #1 complaints that people in the city have. I mean, it's loud living in New York City, period, but road construction is one of the biggest problems. So New York City put out a new community noise ordinance that requires that job sites have to come up with and use the quietest available equipment and reduce the noise levels on their job sites through a variety of means, quieter equipment as well as perhaps sound barriers. So I think we're going to see more of this and more pressure to reduce noise levels from equipment on construction sites. In Europe, they have requirements now that maximizes the amount of noise allowed from various pieces of equipment. And all the equipment manufacturers here in the U.S. sell in Europe, and when they sell it in Europe, it has to have a label on it saying how loud it is so that when people buy equipment, they can choose the quietest available equipment. We hope that we'll be able to do that, something like that here in the U.S. On the runovers and backovers issue, I think, #1, we need to educate contractors about the importance of this. We need to educate them about the availability of some of the technology, and this session later today I think will be very helpful. But also I think we have to start using other techniques to reach people. I think we've been involved in the use of storytelling. I think when we hear statistics about number of people that are backed over by dump trucks or run over by pieces of equipment or backed over when they were putting out traffic control devices, it doesn't really have the kind of impact when you hear a story about it, what really happened to real people who left family members, who are young kids, etc., and really learn about what happened from their peers or from their family members. And I think that's the kind of thing that really motivates people to change their behavior, to improve safety on their job sites, whereas the statistics, I think, are probably not as compelling. And also, we are hoping to work with the manufacturers to make this technology standard equipment on all vehicles that are sold. As one of the manufacturers told me, he says, well, as far as we're concerned, safety should not be an option. So I'll leave it there. I hope that was helpful, and we can have some discussion about this later. Thank you very much.
As you can see, we're very lucky to have really some of the leaders in the country on these various issues of work zone safety, and very well educated by them, and they'll also be available to take questions. And our next speaker is no exception to that rule. Gary Lopez is the Senior Director of Safety for Ranger Construction, a prominent contractor here in this part of the country and in other parts. He has his MS degree in safety from West Virginia University and is a certified safety professional and is a professional member of ASSE. He's involved with a number of organizations, including the chair of the ASSE Standards Development Committee, member of ANSI Z10, former chair of the National Safety Council Standards Committee, and former chair of the Chemical Manufacturers Association Responsible Care for Safety and Health Code. Former general chair of the National Safety Council Chemical Section Executive Committee, and former member of the ANSI Z17 Confined Space. Member of the Keystone Group for BLS record keeping and many other things, and welcome, Gary.
Thank you. All right, I'll do this standing still. I don't do good standing still. But finally, we get the good guys up here, right? I'd just like a show of hands from the folks who are in the road building construction part of the industry in the room. Okay, I'm just checking on who can feel my pain out there. Let me get this right. Just to give you a good idea of who we are, we're part of the Vasilio Group. We've been in this business for over 70 years. We build roads, golf courses, bridges, asphalt paving, underground work. And we do both government and private jobs. Our main geographic areas of operation are in these states you see here: Florida, West Virginia, North Carolina, and Virginia. But we build in our golf course business all across the country, and we also do a lot of paving in Maryland, Pennsylvania, some other states. So that's mainly where we operate, but it gives you an idea of the geographic scope of our operations from a construction standpoint. Our safety culture within the company is understanding that safety is a value-add proposition, and understanding it's a part of a culture of our company. We are not taking the position at all from a safety and health standpoint that it's a necessary evil or that it's something we have to do to comply with standards. We're clear on the fact, the owner of our company has made us clear on the fact, that it's an important part of the business. You need it like you need to watch the quality of your product. You need it like you need to watch your cost controls in your product. Each of these are vital components of running a business today. So if you're ignoring safety, you're in a lot of trouble down the road at some point. And I'll illustrate why in a few moments. We view safety as managing risks, not regulations. We take a look at the risks our business are exposed to, and we focus on that, not just what does a regulation say. We understand that sometimes the regulations are written in such a manner that they're broad in nature, and they don't focus in on exactly what it is that can affect our company directly. We also build it into the value system of our management. We can communicate these same values to our subcontractors as well as our employees. If you look at the areas of concern of risk we have as a company, they fall into four main areas. The first one is employee exposure to the risks inherent in actually building the roads. Interestingly enough, those are the ones we feel the most comfortable with at times because they're known quantities to a great extent, and we pretty much know what to expect up front. The other employee exposure we have is the risk of the public going through our projects. We have an interesting profession when you think about it. We are building in an area in which the public is shooting through our work zones at great rates of speed and in who knows what condition. As you probably heard from my background, I'm not from the construction industry originally. I came out of chemicals and pharmaceuticals. Now, I thought we had some pretty dangerous operations back then. But after spending a couple nights out on some of our interstate paving projects, I longed for the days when all I had to worry about was a plant blowing up here and there. The third one we have is employee exposure to the risk of extensive driving on public roads. We got to get from point A to point B. And if you look at how people are being killed in the workplace out there, falls for years and years and years led, but now driving fatalities are starting to lead the pack. So we have to be concerned about our folks getting around. And the fourth one, which you see I've got highlighted, and I'll discuss why in a moment or two, is the public being exposed to risks of what we're doing while we're building our projects. If you take a look at our first one, employee exposures internal, when we're building our roads, we have known risks. And we feel that we can use a hierarchy of controls to deal with those risks. Any of you in the safety profession are familiar with these hierarchy of controls. We start out at the top saying we want to eliminate them. If we can't, we want to substitute for them. If we can't do either of those, what we're going to do is get some kind of engineering control in place or some type of administrative control. All these things failing, we turn to personal protective equipment. Using these hierarchy of controls, we do a fairly good job of protecting our employees. And we also have then workers' compensation as a type of insurance to protect us. The exposure to our employees from an external standpoint on our work zones is much more problematic. We've got exposure to traffic, and they're going to talk about night work here in the conference a little later, and that obviously increases the rate of risk. As I said, we cannot control an exterior force like a driver coming through one of our work zones at a high rate of speed. I mean, my ultimate solution to it all would be, hey, let us put barrier wall up or close every road we're going to pave out there. That won't work in most instances, and I doubt that we'll ever see that day. So that means we've got to compensate for that by making sure our MOTs laid out well. We do as much as we can to control speed in the work zones, and anything else we can do to enhance our employee safety. As I said, fleet issues are also something we're concerned about. Down here, especially in South Florida, getting from point A to point B is no simple task. We got it all. We've got retirees. We got folks down here on vacation wondering where Mickey is. We've got folks moving up from South America. We've got people who think that the roadways are a qualifying test for the pole position in NASCAR. They're all out there. Anybody who's spent any kind of time driving in South Florida knows that a blinker is a sign of weakness. So we have concerns about also the safety of our folks driving around. Then we've got the public exposure. As I indicated, this is one area that is of major concern to us, and anybody who builds roads probably knows what I'm talking about. It's increasingly becoming a major area of concern to us. We're one of the few businesses, as I've indicated before, where we invite the public into our workplace. We say, come in. I mean, can you imagine, for example, I know some dangerous petrochemical plants I've been involved with in the past, where we would just tell the public, come on through. Yeah, no problem. But we do that on a daily basis. So that forces us to be in a position where we have to have particular concern and pay particular attention to how we lay out our maintenance of traffic. MOT has become a major issue with us. The litigious nature of our society also has become a major problem for us, not just down in Florida, but everywhere. I like to talk about the Stella Liebeck case as being the classic case of what got all this started, but I think it was going on before then. For those of you not familiar with who Stella was, she's a McDonald's lady. If you haven't been paying attention to the news or are not familiar with the case, what it boiled down to is a lady went into McDonald's, got a cup of hot coffee, put it between her legs, spilled coffee, burned herself, sued McDonald's. McDonald's refused to pay a settlement, and she ended up with a multi-million-dollar case. Now, if this had happened 20, 30 years ago, we would have called her the village idiot. Now she gets a lawyer, and she sues for millions. That's happening in a very real sense out in our workplaces today. I can tell you we personally just recently had to settle a case for an enormous amount of money in which we weren't even at the work zone. It happened on a Saturday morning. Nobody there. It would make you feel better, I guess, if you said, well, gee, we ran a guy over with a front end loader, but it was nothing like that. It's an accident took place in a work zone between two motorists. Because of the nature of insurance, the accident, one motorist pulled in front of the other one. The motorist who was involved in the accident, who made the mistake, admitted, yeah, it was my fault. Couldn't see as I was turning. Not enough insurance money there, so who did they go after? Deep pockets. Well, we got the state eliminated because we know their liability extension. We got the engineering firm working for the state who's indemnified. They're out of the program. The motorist who caused the problems got limited insurance. Who's left? So what this means at the end of the day is when we take a look at our work zone design, our work zone MOT setup, we have to be very, very careful. And it doesn't have to be serious incidents. We stress very hard what we call safing up our work zones at the end of the day. Why? Let's just say we happen to be working on a public street. We finish up at the end of the day and we've got a manhole that's just sticking up a little over the allowable height. I can promise you the next day we're going to get a flood of calls saying our wheel was damaged, my front end's damaged, give me a new car. And by the way, if it's a Ranger work zone, we only have Mercedes, Porsches, Lexus, and BMWs going through. I'm still looking for the 1999 Yugo that went through one of our work zones. That never seems to happen to us. So the fact of the matter is it's a liability and it's an issue we have to be concerned with off in the future. And it's going to be increasingly difficult to defend these cases because the lawyers will find a way. Now, in Florida, we've passed legislation saying that if all of our MOT is laid out exactly the way it should be, that we should be free of liability. We thought we were home free, but we're finding out that is still very difficult to defend, but at least it's a start in the defense path. Other concerns we have a consistency of safety culture in a high turnover workplace. I think anybody who's in this business knows that the turnover rate is pretty high, and it's difficult to keep folks on the job. So teaching the new safety culture, the new ability to carry out your safety program with this high turnover workforce is a challenge for us. We also have the ability to address equally across the board. It's not that easy when you're working with subcontractors coming in. You've got various divisions spread out every place to get a consistent degree of how we handle risk across the board. I had to put this picture up because this is a good indication of part of what I'm talking about. We had some new subcontractors come on board with us, and we told them, look, we don't know what you've done in the past, but at Ranger, when you show up on our work site, we want to see hard hats, safety glasses, leather shoes, full pants, okay? We don't want to see you showing up here in your baseball cap. Well, this gentleman apparently was new and did not have a hard hat, so he showed up in his, I don't know whether that's World War II era or Vietnam helmet, and we didn't have the heart to escort him off the site. We said, well, in intent, he met the obligation in terms of what we were looking for. But it's a challenge for us, too, in dealing with our subcontractors. So what's our plan? Well, we're going to do annual risk assessments all across our business line. We're going to do annual business plans to make sure that we can pursue all of the risks we have out there with the available resources. We have corporate safety manuals telling our folks, here's the way you're going to address risk. We have plenty of training and education for our managers and workforce so they know what we expect out of them. We have self-evaluation and management system, recognition programs, constant reinforcement of our culture, and mainly management commitment to make sure we can have a safe workplace. It's about educating people, nurturing the culture, and at the end of the day, walking the talk. And it's people who make it happen for us at the end of the day. Thank you.
Any questions for our panel that we have here? I'll entertain one or two questions, and then we're going to take a very short break and come back to our next session. Any brief questions?
Looking at the picture up there, I'm just wondering if it's like, in order to increase productivity and getting the road done quicker and cut down on fatalities, is that whole entire section shut down? In other words, is there another lane on the other side being used?
Yeah, I think that picture's taken inside the MOT we have laid out on that road.
All right.
We're not crazy enough just to tell our guys go out there and pave, trust me. The foreman would be shot at sunrise. There would be no discussion. So, no, there's MOT laid out.